How long does it take to sew a jiffy dress? The name implies it's a quick process and you'll get it sewn up in a jiffy. But how long does that really mean? It's only got 2 to 3 main pattern pieces. It says it's easy to cut and easy to sew, but there's no time recommendation. Now, looking at this pattern and reviewing the instructions, I think I can sew this dress in 2 hours or less. And I know it's something you've been wondering about too. So keep watching and let's find out how long it takes to sew. Hi, I'm Tony, and this is So Lounge. Now, this is a vintage reprint that I recently purchased on simplicity.com. It is Simplicity 9884. If you like this pattern, you can still buy it now. It's an official, authentic reprint of a 1960s vintage pattern. Now, the version I'm going to be making is version 1, so it does really only have 2 main pattern pieces. It's the front of the dress and the back of the dress, a front neck, back neck, and then armhole facings to go along with this. So it's a fairly basic dress. There are bust darts, there are center front darts, and there are also center back darts and a back neck dart. So 4 darts on the front, 4 darts on the back, but otherwise it's pretty straightforward. Now, a couple of things to note before we get started is the size 14 in this vintage reprint is smaller than the usual size 14s that I buy from Simplicity. So to account for the discrepancy and to add a tiny bit more ease into the bust measurement, which was really the one that was the smallest, I added a 3/8 of an inch seam allowance to the side seams and the center back seam to just give me a little bit more breathing room so that when I sew everything up at 5/8, it still all works. I did not add any additional seam allowances to the armholes or the necklines because at 5/8 of an inch, that's a lot of seam to work with in the curves, and I didn't want to cause additional problems with that. Now, before I start any sewing project, I like to take a look at the instructions and see what I'm in for, especially considering this is a vintage pattern. Now, I wasn't sure if they were going to update the directions or keep it real and use the old 60s instructions. And I'm glad I checked because they're using the old instructions, which is good and bad. Bad because they didn't have iron-in interfacing back in the 60s. So the method for attaching the interfacing is to actually sew it to the main part of the dress and then attach the facing on top of it. And so instead, I cut all the interfacing pieces and attach them to their corresponding facing pieces. So that's one thing that's going to make this a little bit easier and a little bit faster, is I get to skip that whole step. The other thing that I'm glad that I took a look at is the stay stitching, because of course I assumed there was going to be stay stitching on the neckline, but this pattern also calls for stay stitching on the shoulder seams and the side seam curve between the notch and up to the bust. So I was really not expecting that, but it's another step we're going to do. And even though, you know, there's stay stitching and we're putting in an invisible zipper, this is a fairly basic dress. There is a slit on the side, so the hem detail and side seam finishing will be a little bit more complicated, but nothing that is unmanageable in 2 hours. So I have all of my fabric cut out. My pattern pieces are marked. My facing is attached, as previously mentioned, and I am ready to head to the sewing machine. Before we get started, let me tell you everything that I've got set up and ready to go. So my ironing board is up, the iron is on, it's set for cotton, it's full of water, so it's ready to do some steaming. My sewing machine is all threaded. I'm just using regular Coats & Clark poly thread, and I am using a size 70-10 needle, which is a smaller, finer needle. The fabric I'm using is this gorgeous cotton sateen that is a Pierre Cardin print. I bought this at Mood, New York back in August of 2022, so it's been waiting just until I found the right project. This fabric is so soft and so fabulous. Like, it was beautiful before I washed it. And then after I washed it, it got even softer. And I think this is going to be a super comfortable, yet very sophisticated looking dress. And it's going to be perfect for the Texas heat. Before we get started, I have my trusty timer. I like to time in 15-minute increments so I can kind of keep track of where I am. And if I need to stop for any reason, it's not a major disaster. And to get started, looking at the instructions, the first step is to do some stay stitching. Now, if you're new to stay stitching, this is just a regular length stitch, whatever you normally sew with. I like to sew at 2.5. It's a little bit easier to rip out if you have to, or I have to. Because we're sewing stay stitching, we want to sew it inside the seam line. So I am just going to line up the outside edge of my neckline with the presser foot. That will put it in at 1/4 inch. That will be inside of the 5/8 inch seam allowance, and we will be good to go. The front neckline stay stitching is all done, and I checked the instructions just to see if there was a particular order to go in for the stay stitching, and there isn't. So usually from all the vintage sewing books that I've looked at, you do all the stay stitching first and then you start sewing the garment. So even though the first instruction on the pattern is to sew the darts first, I'm going with they really want us to stay stitch everything and then sew the darts. Now that all the stay stitching is in, I'm going to move to the darts. I'm going to get these bust darts pinned in and sew them first, and then I will sew the center back darts. I did get all my marks transferred and double check that they were transferred before we started this whole process, because that always makes everything a whole lot easier than trying to do it halfway through your project. Bust darts are pinned. I'm going to get them sewn up real quick. When I sew darts, I always sew from the seam edge in towards the point. I have heard tell that you can sew the other way from the point out to the seam, but that makes me a little bit nervous, so I'm just gonna stick with what I know, because then that way I know things won't get messed up. So I've got 15 minutes left before I'm done with the first hour of sewing. My darts are all in and the stay stitching has been done. So it took a while to get to that state, but it is finished now. 45 minutes is kind of slow, but I did have to rip out those bust darts and then restitch them. So that was on me, not the actual process. Now, the next step is to attach the interfacing to the body of the dress. I am not doing this as mentioned earlier. I have attached the interfacing to my facings, which is the more modern way to do this, because now we have iron in or press in interfacing. Once we get this all sewn together, because I'm going to put the front and the back pieces together as well as the armholes, I'm going to head to the ironing board and press open my darts, get my facing seams pressed open. So I'm going to let that cool for a second so that it sets, and then I'm going to switch over to the other one. And then I think I'm going to use my sleeve for the center dart, because I think that will give it the curve that it needs without, pressing it too flat if we just pressed it on the ironing board. So it's another use of a sleeve roll. I think that's what they're called. I call it a sleeve ham, but technically this is the ham. So I'm just going to repeat the process. These are getting pressed towards the center front, and then the back darts will get pressed to the center back. So just the same process, just going down it gently. Now that my facings are all sewn together, I want to press that seam open so that I can get them finished. Once we head over to the serger, that's all going to be ready to go. I'm using a press cloth because anytime you're using interfacing, you do not want your iron touching it, because it will melt. And either when you're putting it in or when you're pressing a seam that is surrounded by interfacing. So the armhole seam is pressed open. I'm going to move on to the neckband. Same process, still using my press cloth. I realized that I did not snip the threads on all of these pieces, and it's driving me crazy. So I'm going to just take a second to cut those all off, and to also tie my darts, which I did not do prior to pressing, which is okay because, doesn't really matter. But I just need to get those done so then I can snip them and then they will look neat and tidy and I won't have all these random threads hanging out everywhere. And we're about at this point an hour and 15 minutes into the project. I say about because I kind of lost track of the time because I had some major equipment malfunctions. My mic stopped working, and so the whole facing part of this video is silent. There is no audio. I am just talking to a camera, and you can't hear me. And then my phone battery died. So everything's okay. My second mic is finally working, and I have enough phone battery to finish filming. That's why I say about an hour and a half, which is still slow going, all things considered. Now, we put in the center back zipper before we sew the shoulders. Oh, I'm not mentally prepared to do an invisible zipper. Okay. I'm going to go press the center back seam 5/8 of an inch in preparation for an invisible zipper. And then I will work on getting that sewn and we'll talk through the whole process and see if I can do it this time. I am going to wear my reading glasses so I will be able to see and hopefully it will go smoother than the last time I tried to do this without them. I've been going back and forth a lot about putting in this invisible zipper because yesterday when I started filming, it was the end of the day and I was like, I'm just tired. I don't want to do this. And I'm really glad that I didn't because I've thought of a couple of things since I started filming this video. And one of them is instead of pressing the center back seam towards the wrong side like you normally would, what if I pressed it 5/8 inch in at towards the right side of the fabric, and that way when I unfold it, it's going to be a lot easier to see where that 5/8 inch mark is to be able to match up my zipper. The other thing I remembered is the last time I did this, when I made the Matisse dress, I ended up ripping out my zipper and sewing it a second time because it moved while I was going through the sewing process. So I was talking to my friend Jen this morning, and she suggested that I go get some Wonder Tape. She's like, your life will change. It will be perfect for putting in your zipper. It's going to make it so much easier. And I remembered that there were several suggestions on that Matisse dress video to use Wonder Tape for the zipper to prevent any kind of problems. So I went to Joann's and got the Wonder Tape. I also got a white invisible zipper since I was there anyway. And, the background of my fabric's white. So when you line this up, and this has always been a challenge of mine, is getting it at the right distance from the top of the neckline seam once we're going to add the facing and all of that, and then putting in a hook and eye. I can't ever do that right. It's just a major challenge for me. And so looking at the instructions, it says and then it says pin the closed zipper under the opening edges with tab end 1/2 inch below the neckline seam. So neckline seam is going to be 5/8 of an inch. We want to go down a 1/2 inch from that. So that comes out to 1 1/4 inches, I believe. So next what I'm going to do is you want to take your zipper and line the teeth up to 5/8 inch line because you want the coil of the zipper to be on that line. So I'm going to stick this to my zipper first, and then I'm going to peel off the other side. It's like double stick tape for sewing. That's kind of the best way to describe it. I have my tape in the right place. Let's make sure that's 5/8. Let's head over to the sewing machine. I'm going to change out my foot and sew this in, and fingers crossed it all works. So I have the full center back done. It does need to be pressed. I do need to press that seam open so that then I can get it all finished. Next step on the pattern instructions, which I was just looking at, is to attach the front to the back at the shoulder seams. So I think I'm going to sew that up quickly and then go to the ironing board, press everything open, and then finish the shoulder seams and that center back seam. And then we will start attaching the neck facing and get that all done. The serging was actually pretty quick and super efficient, and I got the center back and shoulder seams done as well as the finishing on all of the facings, and that took about 20 minutes. So not bad. I do have all my threads snipped, so everything is ready to sew. We are going to be working with the neck facing next. If you're wondering about the time, I've kind of lost track because I've gotten so caught up in everything else that was happening and all my tech difficulties. And I'm thinking that I have been sewing for about 2 hours now, or working on this project for about 2 hours, 2.5 hours. I don't know. And but the actual sewing time has been about an hour. Um, so it's probably been longer than that realistically, because I was at an hour and a half yesterday and only about 30 minutes of that was actual sewing. So we're probably at 2.5 hours of working on this project and about 45 minutes of actual sewing. So I did get some things done, but I've also lost track of the time, which I'm sorry, it happened. It became quickly evident that this was not going to get done in 2 hours, despite best efforts. So I think it was just more of the fact that I haven't sewn in a while. And so I'm kind of rusty. Not rusty, but like, I haven't been doing it regularly in the last few weeks just because of other stuff going on. And because of that, I've been making a lot of stupid mistakes. And I also had a lot of apprehension regarding this invisible zipper, and it turned out very well. So that was just kind of also unnecessary. But the Wonder Tape definitely helped with that process. So I'm glad I did make that effort. So I'm at my serger. I usually try and film like this way, but there's no space. There's a dog under this table on a big dog bed, and Honey is not moving anytime soon. So I did stitch the seams together. I did press them open, and now I'm just going to serge them to finish the seams. And then I'm also going to serge the edge of the flap so that once I turn that all under, it's finished. I don't have to do that fold under and stitch 1/4 of an inch. We're just going to do it this way. It's going to be a little bit faster. And at this point, I'm all about getting this dress finished. So while I am at the serger, I was thinking about finishing the hem, and they instructions say to use some bias hem tape to finish the edge, and then you fold it up and you slip stitch. I'm not going to do that. So I was thinking that I would do a finished edge with the serger, and then I will fold it accordingly to do a blind hem stitch with my sewing machine. And that's going to be more of a finish that I'm interested in than attaching, the hem finish and then slip stitching and doing all of that. The machine does a better job of blind hem stitch than I do. There comes a time in every project where sometimes you have to make the decision to just walk away. And this project and this dress has been a challenge, not because of the dress or the pattern, but because of the variety of tech difficulties that I have had during this entire process. So yesterday I was finishing out the hem and my phone battery died. I did not realize it had gotten so low. So while it was charging, I figured, okay, I'm going to go do all the hand sewing and tack the, top of the dress to the zipper, tack the facings in place. And when I was getting ready to tack the armhole facing, I noticed that it was doing some weird kind of puckering. And I couldn't figure out why. And then I realized I didn't clip the curves before I did the understitching, which may not be a major problem, but it's giving this kind of rippled look along the armhole, which I don't like. Now I have to go rip out these armhole facings and re-sew them after I clip the seams, because the understitching is causing, you can see there's like this puckering along the facings because I didn't clip the seam before I understitched. So that's on me. That's another bad on me. This project has taken a lot longer because of stupid mistakes I've made. So not getting the darts lined up on the bust and then sewing them anyway, and then having to rip them out and restart, and a variety of other things. Not having the Wonder Tape for the zipper ready to go, having to go get it. All these things have added to the length of this project and how long it's been taking, plus add to the fact that, I didn't get to spend as much time on it as Friday as I would have liked because of work. And, we had dinner plans last night, so I finished around 4 so that I could get ready and go do that. So yeah, I think I'm just going to call it and be done. And I'm going to pop this on my dress form so I can show you everything I've accomplished so far. And, it's almost done. I have to just redo the understitching and rip all that out and then clip and then resew that. And then the hem is in, so that's good. But I just need to finish these, the side slits, and then, the dress will be ready to wear. But I need to take a breather and just step back from it for a minute because rushing is not helping, and trying to get this all done in this arbitrary time allotment is not particularly helpful with this project. So this is my dress. It looks good. I am happy with the way it's gone so far. Um, But let's talk about what's good first. So I think the neckline looks really nice. I did clip that. That's why it looks nice. And then I am very happy with the way that the zipper went in. It's nice and smooth. You can't see it. I got it right where it needed to be thanks to the Wonder Tape. And all I have to do is put a little hook and eye up here to just close that top. It needs a good press. There is a little bit of wrinkling just from the fabric. Regarding the problems, there's a tiny weird bubble here, so I'm not sure if this dart is exactly in the right place. I might need to go back in and adjust it a little bit once I put it on my body to see, but usually the dress form is a pretty good gauge, and it looks like that dart's not quite long enough or quite where it's supposed to be. And then the armholes there's kind of a weird kind of puckering. It's hard to see, but if you flip the facing to the outside, you can see how it's fluttery, and it shouldn't be doing that. It should be smooth, but there is that extra tension in there being held in place because I didn't clip those curves before the understitching. So I have to go back in and do that and re-sew it to, have a nice finished dress that's going to be the quality that I want it to be. So I popped on my dress and it doesn't fit. Not only did I not get this sewn in 2 hours, everything I did to make it fit better actually made it fit worse. So I've wasted a lot of time messing with this. It's too big. It's too big in the back. You can see like way too big in the back. If you pull it in the back, it looks a little bit better in the front, but still not great. It's just too big. It's too big everywhere. And then the darts are too high. I don't know what happened there because I didn't adjust that part of it. And this whole piece up here, way too big. So I'm basically going to have to rip the whole thing out because I still love this fabric and I think it's going to be a really pretty dress. It's kind of the sneak peek of this is what it might look like, sort of, once I get the fit done. And it's super soft. It feels great. I mean, this is going to be super comfortable to wear in the heat of the summer and into the fall in Texas because it's still warm here. And it's going to be worth the effort. Good news is that when I take those seam allowances off, I think I can just wear the straight 14 Jiffy pattern without any alterations. And I will do a better job marking the darts because I think that might be part of the problem too. I don't know if I got those exactly where they were supposed to be in hindsight, now that I've got this on. And, since I'm going to be cutting off that extra, 3/8 of an inch, I will have some clean seams that will need to be refinished, but that means I will not have to rip out all of the serging. Additionally, the tape I used to put in the zipper washes out. So first step is going to be to wash this dress real quick and get that tape dissolved so that it'll be much easier to rip out that zipper and start the whole process again. Now, if you are feeling kind of bummed about this whole video and not getting this sewn in 2 hours, I'm right there with you because I really thought I could do this. I've got another great video coming up next. It's much more satisfaction to see me sew this 2-hour dress. So check it out. I know you'll love it, and I'll see you over there.